The crystal chandeliers reflected the winter sunlight filtering through the expansive panoramic windows. Alistair Finch stood before the mirror in his home study, adjusting his tie of faultless silk in a deep navy blue, much like everything else about him. His bespoke huntsman suit, immaculately polished brogues, and carefully groomed features all spoke of success, of precisely what his father had always desired. But the reflection staring back at him held a weariness, an aloofness, as if observing a play he'd long ceased to be the protagonist of. He was a solicitor, one of the finest in London, a partner at the prestigious firm of Cromwell and Davies. His name appeared in society pages, his counsel was sought after by clients, and his father regarded him with a reserved pride that still demanded more. More deals, greater profits, wider recognition. Alistair sighed, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down on his shoulders. Today's deal with global investments was critical. Success would bring not only a substantial fee and partnership at Cromwell and Davies but, most importantly, the approval of his father, acknowledgement that he had finally become worthy of the Finch legacy. He remembered his father's words from childhood. "Success is all that matters, Alistair. Prove you're worthy of the name Finch." And Alistair had spent his life proving it. Devoting himself to his studies, eschewing friendships and romantic entanglements, sacrificing personal happiness for career advancement. All in pursuit of that elusive look of approval, so rarely bestowed upon him. He heard muffled voices drifting from the drawing room. His father and Barnaby, the matter of the inheritance. He froze, a chill creeping down his spine. Were they really considering altering the will in Barnaby's favor? He tried to convince himself had misheard. Barnaby. His younger brother. A creative soul, an artist dabbling in watercolor landscapes and abstract pieces, living in a modest flat in Islington and pursuing his passions for their own sake. He had never shown any interest in the family business, dismissing corporate culture with a disdainful sniff and declaring money vulgar. He generally behaved as if he couldn't care less what anyone thought of him. Alistair swallowed, a bitterness rising in his throat. All his efforts, all the sacrifices, were they for nothing? Had endured years of relentless pressure, turned down opportunities for love and companionship, to become the man his father wanted, a successful businessman, a worthy heir. And now it could all be overturned by a single decision from his father. He moved towards the drawing room door, intending to express his indignation, but stopped, catching fragments of conversation. "Must give him a chance, he sees things we overlook," his father's words landed like a blow. Alistair recoiled, leaning against the wall. Did Barnaby truly see something that he didn't? Something vital for the future of the Finch empire? Or was it simply another whim from his father, a manifestation of weakness and a penchant for unpredictable decisions? He felt anger, mixed with despair. Anger at Barnaby for his indifference to the family business, at his father for the injustice, and most acutely, at himself for having lived so long according to someone else's rules. Suddenly, he heard his mother's quiet murmur. "Don't fret, darling. Everything will be all right." But her words offered no comfort. Alistair knew nothing would be all right. His world had fractured in an instant, leaving behind only shards of shattered hopes and the bitter taste of disappointment. He turned away, returning to his study feeling adrift and alone. The gilded cage he'd so meticulously constructed felt like a trap, with no apparent escape. And now, he faced the daunting task of finding a way out, or resigning himself to the fact that his life had been nothing more than a shadow of someone else's dream. The silence in the Finch household was thick enough to cut with a knife. Alistair had attempted to broach the subject of the will with his father that evening, but received only evasive answers and thinly veiled dismissals. "Alistair, darling," his mother had soothed, patting his arm with an unsettlingly cheerful air, "your father is simply exploring options. Don't fret." His father, meanwhile, had offered a curt, "It's a private matter, Alistair. Best not to concern yourself with it." Each response felt like another nail hammered into the coffin of Alistair's expectations. He felt betrayed, not just by his father's decision, but by the lack of transparency and the dismissive way he was being treated. It was as if years of dedication meant nothing. A sudden shift in familial favoritism had rendered his efforts meaningless. The pressure began to manifest itself in ways Alistair hadn't anticipated. He snapped at his junior partner over a minor administrative error, finding himself inexplicably irritated by the most trivial things. His usual composure frayed at the edges, replaced by a simmering anger he struggled to contain. His relationship with Eleanor, his girlfriend of 2 years, suffered the brunt of his frustration. She'd tried to be understanding, but Alistair's constant irritability and terse replies had created an emotional chasm between them. "You've been different lately," Shed said tentatively over dinner that evening, her voice laced with concern. "Sharp. Distant." He'd responded with a dismissive wave of his hand, muttering something about work pressures before retreating into silence. The unspoken accusation hung heavy in the air between them. He found himself obsessively comparing Barnaby to himself. Barnaby, who spent his days sketching landscapes in parks and selling the occasional watercolor at local craft fairs. Barnaby, who had never once expressed interest in joining Cromwell and Davies or following in his father's footsteps. To Alistair, he appeared as a feckless dilettante, a man adrift without purpose or ambition. "He's wasting his life," Alistair muttered to himself, pacing the length of his study. "Painting pretty pictures while I'm building an empire." He couldn't understand what his father saw in Barnaby, what quality could possibly outweigh years of dedication and achievement. Was it simply a rebellious streak, a desire to shock and defy expectations? He pulled up Barnaby's website, a rudimentary collection of watercolor landscapes and abstract pieces. The images were pleasant enough, but hardly groundbreaking. Alistair scrolled through them with a mixture of disdain and grudging curiosity. There was something about the way Barnaby captured light, a certain sensitivity to color that Alistair couldn't deny. But it still felt like a hobby, not a vocation. He sank into his leather armchair, the weight of his own life pressing down on him. He began to dissect his existence, peeling back the layers of carefully constructed success and revealing the emptiness beneath. When did I decide this was what I wanted? The question echoed in his mind, startlingly loud. Did I ever truly want it? He'd always been a good student, excelling at everything he put his hand to. But that excellence had never stemmed from genuine passion, it was driven by the desire for approval, for validation. Head followed the path laid out for him: Oxford, law school, Cromwell and Davies, each step meticulously planned and executed with ruthless efficiency. He remembered fleeting moments of rebellion in his youth, a brief flirtation with photography, an interest in learning to play the saxophone. But those interests had been swiftly extinguished by his father's subtle but persistent disapproval. "Alistair," Head said once, after seeing Alistair's photographs, "photography is a hobby for amateurs. You have far greater potential." The memory stung. He realized that every decision he'd made, from choosing his university to selecting his career path, had been dictated by someone else's expectations. He'd become a puppet dancing on the strings of familial ambition, oblivious to the fact that he was sacrificing his own happiness in the process. He looked around his opulent study, the expensive furniture, the antique maps adorning the walls, the leather-bound first editions lining the shelves. It all felt like a stage set, designed to project an image of success and accomplishment. But behind the facade lay a profound sense of emptiness. He was trapped in a gilded cage, surrounded by material possessions but starved for genuine connection and purpose. Alistair closed his eyes, a wave of despair washing over him. The blow below the belt hadn't just been the altered will, it was the realization that Head spent his entire life chasing a phantom, a validation that would never truly satisfy him. He had to find a way out, but the prospect felt daunting, almost impossible. How could he dismantle a lifetime of conditioning? How could he redefine himself after years of playing a role he no longer recognized? He opened his eyes, staring blankly at the rain streaking down the windowpane. The future stretched before him, uncertain, unsettling, and terrifyingly open. For the first time in his life, Alistair Finch felt utterly lost. The initial shock and despair began to give way to a grudging determination. Alistair realized wallowing in self-pity wouldn't change the situation. He needed answers. He decided to embark on a quest for understanding, starting with the most unlikely source, Barnaby. He found Barnaby at his usual haunt. A small, independent coffee shop near Islington Green, sketching furiously in a worn notebook. Alistair hesitated before approaching, feeling awkward and out of place amidst the bohemian atmosphere. "Barnaby," he said tentatively, "mind if I join you?" Barnaby looked up, surprised but not unfriendly. "Alistair. Fancy seeing you here. Pull up a chair." The conversation was initially stilted. Alistair tried to steer it towards business matters, subtly probing Barnaby's understanding of Cromwell and Davies. But Barnaby deflected the questions with an easygoing charm that frustrated Alistair. He spoke about his art, his passion for capturing the fleeting beauty of London life, and his desire to create something meaningful. Alistair listened intently, trying to see beyond the surface of a carefree artist. He noticed the way Barnaby observed the world, not with the calculating gaze of a businessman, but with an open-minded curiosity that seemed genuinely refreshing. "You don't seem particularly interested in the family business," Alistair finally said, unable to contain himself. Barnaby shrugged. "It's never been my thing, I suppose. Dad always said I had a head for other things." He paused, then added with a wry smile, "Besides, spreadsheets and legal jargon aren't exactly inspiring subjects." The comment stung more than Alistair expected. It highlighted the chasm between their worlds, his world of rigid structure and predictable outcomes, Barnaby's world of creative exploration and boundless possibility. Later that evening, Alistair braced himself for a confrontation with his father. The conversation was tense from the outset. His father sat behind his imposing mahogany desk, radiating an air of quiet authority. "I'd like to understand your reasoning," Alistair began, carefully choosing his words. "Why Barnaby?" After all these years, his father steepled his fingers and regarded him with a disconcertingly calm expression. "Alistair, you've always been excellent at executing plans, at maintaining the status quo. You're efficient, reliable, qualities I admire. But those qualities alone aren't enough to lead Cromwell and Davies into the future. What are you implying?" Alistair challenged, his voice rising slightly. "I'm saying that Barnaby possesses something you lack. A creative spark, an ability to see opportunities where others see obstacles. The world is changing, Alistair. We need someone who can adapt, who can think outside the box." His father paused, then added pointedly, "You're too focused on preserving what we have. Barnaby understands that sometimes you need to dismantle in order to rebuild." The words hit Alistair like a physical blow. He felt his carefully constructed image of himself, the diligent heir, the responsible son, crumbling around him. He sought solace from his mother later that night, finding her tending to her roses in the conservatory. The scent of blossoms filled the air, but it couldn't mask the underlying tension. "Mother," he began hesitantly, "do you know why Father made this decision?" His mother sighed, a hint of sadness in her eyes. "Your father sees things differently than we do, darling." She paused, then continued softly, "I always worried that I pushed you too hard, Alistair. Your father wanted a mirror image of himself, someone who would carry on the family legacy without question." She looked at him with genuine regret. "I saw in Barnaby a chance for something different. A chance for freedom, for self-expression. He always reminded me of myself when I was younger, yearning to break free from societal expectations." Alistair felt a wave of understanding wash over him. His mother's words illuminated the situation in a new light. It wasn't about Barnaby being inherently better, it was about his father recognizing a need for change, a need for someone who could challenge the established order. And perhaps, Alistair realized with a pang of guilt, he had become too comfortable within that order to see the need for change himself. He began to understand that success wasn't solely defined by wealth or power. It was about finding purpose, pursuing passions, and living authentically, qualities he hadn't actively sought in his own life. His relentless pursuit of his father's approval had blinded him to his own desires, trapping him in a cycle of expectation and obligation. He looked out at the rain-soaked garden, the roses swaying gently in the breeze. The world felt different now, imbued with a newfound sense of possibility. He still didn't fully understand his father's decision, but he was beginning to see it not as an act of betrayal, but as a catalyst for change, a chance to redefine himself and forge his own path, free from the weight of expectation. The journey wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long time, Alistair Finch felt a flicker of hope, and a nascent desire to discover what that path might truly hold. The decision was swift and decisive, born from the clarity gained in the aftermath of his father's announcement. Alistair tendered his resignation from Cromwell and Davies, much to the shock and dismay of his senior partner. "You're throwing away a lifetime of opportunity," the men had sputtered, but Alistair remained firm. "I'm not throwing anything away," he replied calmly. "I'm simply choosing a different path." He spent the next few weeks divesting himself of his responsibilities at the firm, meticulously handing over files and projects to ensure a smooth transition. The process was surprisingly liberating. Each relinquished task felt like shedding another layer of expectation. He dusted off his old camera equipment, the lenses gathering dust in a forgotten corner of his study. Photography had been a childhood passion, suppressed by his father's disapproval. Now, it beckoned him with renewed urgency. He started small, documenting the changing light on the Thames, the bustling energy of Borough Market, the quiet beauty of Hampstead Heath. He also reached out to Barnaby. Initially hesitant, Alistair found himself drawn to Barnaby's easygoing nature and genuine enthusiasm for art. They began meeting regularly, not to discuss business or family matters, but to simply talk about photography, art, and life. A surprising camaraderie developed between them, built on mutual respect and a shared appreciation for beauty. Barnaby even suggested they collaborate on a project, a photographic exhibition showcasing the hidden corners of London. Alistair, initially skeptical, found himself drawn into the idea. Working alongside Barnaby was invigorating, his creative energy was infectious, and he challenged Alistair's rigid approach to photography. The exhibition, titled London Unseen, was a modest success. Local newspapers praised its unique perspective on familiar landmarks, highlighting the unexpected beauty of everyday life. More importantly, it marked a turning point for Alistair, a tangible manifestation of his newfound freedom and purpose. He knew he needed to address the elephant in the room: his relationship with his parents. The conversation was difficult, fraught with unspoken emotions. He found his mother in the conservatory again, tending to her roses. "Mother," he began, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands, "I need to talk to you and Father." The meeting with his father was even more challenging. His father sat behind his desk, radiating an air of controlled disapproval. "You've abandoned everything we worked for," he stated flatly. Alistair took a deep breath. "No, Father. I'm not abandoning anything. I'm simply choosing to pursue my own happiness." He paused, then continued, "I realize now that your approval wasn't the key to my happiness. It was a cage, keeping me from discovering what truly mattered." He explained his passion for photography, his desire to create something meaningful, and his newfound appreciation for the simple joys of life. He acknowledged his past failings, his relentless pursuit of his father's approval, his inability to think outside the box. "I'm not asking for your permission," he concluded. "I just want you to understand." His father remained silent for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "Perhaps," he said quietly, "you're right." There was a flicker of something in his eyes, perhaps regret, perhaps understanding. His mother, who had been listening intently, stepped forward and placed her hand on Alistair's arm. "We love you, darling," she said softly. "We just want you to be happy." Alistair smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. He didn't need their approval anymore, he had found it within himself. He continued to build his life on his own terms. He established a small photography studio in Shoreditch, specializing in portraiture and documentary work. He collaborated with Barnaby on various artistic projects, exploring the hidden narratives of London's diverse communities. His days were filled with purpose and passion, chasing light, capturing moments, telling stories through his lens. He was no longer defined by his family name or his position in a prestigious law firm. He was Alistair, the photographer, forging his own path, guided by his own values and desires. He had traded the gilded cage of expectation for the boundless freedom of choice, and he wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. The rain continued to fall on London, but now, Alistair saw it not as a symbol of gloom, but as a source of inspiration, a constant reminder that even amidst the greyest skies, beauty could always be found. The opening night of Alistair's second exhibition, Echoes of the City, was a culmination of months of hard work and nervous anticipation. Held at a trendy gallery in Mayfair, the event buzzed with energy. Critics, collectors, friends, and family mingled amongst the striking black and white photographs that adorned the walls. Alistair felt a knot of anxiety tightening in his stomach as he surveyed the crowd. He poured his heart and soul into this project, documenting the lives of ordinary Londoners, their struggles, their triumphs, their quiet moments of resilience. Would they appreciate it? Would they see what he saw, the beauty hidden within the mundane? The response was immediate and overwhelmingly positive. Critics lauded his unique perspective, praising his ability to capture emotion and tell stories through a single image. The public flocked to the gallery, drawn in by the evocative portraits and landscapes. Alistair felt a surge of pride wash over him, not the hollow pride of professional achievement, but a deep sense of fulfillment that resonated within his very being. He spotted Barnaby across the room, beaming with genuine enthusiasm. They exchanged a knowing glance, a silent acknowledgement of their shared journey. The initial awkwardness between them had vanished completely, replaced by a comfortable camaraderie built on mutual respect and creative collaboration. As the evening progressed, Alistair noticed his parents standing near a cluster of photographs depicting elderly residents of a local care home. His father's expression was unreadable, but Alistair sensed a shift in his demeanor, a softening that he hadn't witnessed before. Later, as the crowd began to thin out, his father approached him. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken emotions. "These are remarkable," his father finally said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "You've captured something real." He paused, then added, "I see now that I was wrong." Alistair braced himself for a lecture or an apology, but instead, his father continued, "I wanted you to follow in my footsteps, to secure the family legacy. But I failed to see that true success isn't about upholding tradition, it's about finding your own path and pursuing it with passion." He looked at Alistair with a mixture of regret and admiration. "You found yours, son. And you've done remarkably well." The words were simple, but they carried immense weight, a validation that Alistair had longed for his entire life. The years of suppressed emotions, the burden of expectation, seemed to lift from his shoulders, replaced by a profound sense of liberation. He felt a surge of gratitude towards his father, not just for the acknowledgement, but for finally allowing him to be himself. Alistair found Barnaby standing near the window, gazing out at the London skyline. The city lights twinkled below, reflecting in their eyes. "Quite a night," Barnaby said with a grin. "You've done yourself proud." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple. Alistair felt a sense of peace he hadn't known was possible, a feeling of being truly free. "So," Barnaby said finally, breaking the silence, "what's next?" "Another exhibition." Alistair smiled. "I've been thinking about documenting the lives of immigrant communities in London," he replied. "Telling their stories, giving them a voice." Barnaby nodded enthusiastically. "That sounds incredible. I'm in." They spent the rest of the evening discussing their plans, ambitious projects that would showcase the diversity and resilience of London's people. The shadow of his father's expectations had receded completely, replaced by the bright light of self-realization and purpose. As he walked home through the quiet streets of Islington, Alistair reflected on his journey. He realized that true success wasn't about accumulating wealth or earning approval, it was about being authentic, pursuing passions, and making a difference in the world, however small. He thought about his parents, their complex motivations, and their ultimate acceptance of his choices. He understood now that their actions stemmed from love and a desire to protect him, even if their methods were misguided. He felt a sense of closure, a release from the burden of past grievances. Reaching his flat, he paused on the doorstep, taking a deep breath of the crisp evening air. The city lights twinkled around him, a testament to the vibrant tapestry of human life. He smiled, feeling a profound sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought him here, to this moment of clarity and contentment. The echoes of his past still lingered, but they no longer held power over him. He was Alistair Finch, photographer, storyteller, and most importantly, a man finally free to be himself. The true success wasn't in the accolades or the recognition, it was in the ability to follow his own dreams, with integrity and passion, a beacon of light illuminating his path forward.